Have you ever looked at your life and just wondered, is this really it? There's got to be something more. There's got to be something bigger. There's got to be something in our minds better. And it's not that your life is bad. You love your family. Hopefully they love you. You have other people in your life that you care about, that care about you, people that you spend time with. Maybe you go to work or you go to class. You pay the bills. You prepare food. You do the things that you probably did last week and probably are going to do next week. But at some point, as you're doing all of those things, like you've always done, like you always will do, you wake up and you say, where is God in all of this? Where is God in all of my daily routine? Where is God in all the mundane moments of my life? Where is God? Because there's something inside of us, at least most of us, that is looking for something big, something significant, something extravagant. We want God to do something huge in our lives. We want our faith to make a difference. We want to leave an impact on the world. We want to be a part of something so much bigger than ourselves. But consider this. What if God is at work in your life? He's at work in your life more than just in the outstanding, but maybe he's at work in your life in the ordinary. And maybe we just miss him. Maybe we don't have eyes to see what he's doing. Last Wednesday, I went to the dentist for a cleaning, and at my dentist, they have these huge TVs mounted on the ceiling right above the chair, so as you're laying back, you can watch the TV, which is kind of nice, because it beats making small talk with a handful of dental instruments in your mouth, right? We've all tried to do that. So you just watch TV while they work on your teeth. And every time I'm in there, I'm thinking, man, I hope that thing doesn't fall. I hope that doesn't fall on me. And I always want to ask them, you did use anchors to mount that, right? I mean, I just want to clarify. But I don't ask. I just assume they did. It hasn't fallen yet, as far as I know. It hasn't fallen on me. If that's happened to you, I'm so sorry. Usually they ask you, what would you like to watch? They didn't ask me on Wednesday, so I just was stuck watching what was on the TV. And what was on the TV was a program called How It's Made. I'd never seen this before. Fascinating stories about everyday things, how they're manufactured. And so during my cleaning, I got to learn about barbecue grill tools, how those are made, fire truck ladders, that was exciting, antique clocks, and glass water faucets, which I didn't even know was a thing. I learned about those. And then manual hedge trimmers, like giant scissors that you trim the hedges, the landscaping with. And that segment really caught my attention because I noticed every person had a different job. And so there was one person who had to take the trimmers and put them in this vise and sort of bend them just to give it a slight angle, and then they would pass it on. Someone else put a little rubber bumper between the two blades. They would insert that piece and then pass it on. Someone else slid the grippy handles on the end. And then finally, before it was put in a box, someone just put a sticker on the handle. And I was watching this, and I'm thinking, that person and those people, they do the same thing over and over and over again. I thought how maddening it would be to do something so seemingly insignificant, so mundane, so, quite frankly, boring. And then I thought, that's how many of us view our lives. We're not sticking a sticker on a tool and passing it on. We're doing all kinds of things, and yet sometimes we feel just like that, don't we? I do the same thing over and over. Where is God in all of this? Where is this leading? What is this about? One of our greatest struggles with finding purpose in life is that we don't want to live ordinary lives. We don't want to live an everyday life. We don't want to settle for the insignificant. We prefer jobs that are interesting, lives that are exciting, a purpose that stands out from everyone else. We want God to do something big in our lives. God, give me something incredible. Don't give me something plain, commonplace. That's not necessarily wrong, but here's the problem with it. What if we're so busy waiting for God to do something extraordinary that we miss what he's already doing in the ordinary? Has that ever happened to you? Maybe you didn't see God. You were looking for God, at least you thought you were looking for God, and then later you look back during a season of life or during a period of life and you say, oh man, I was looking in the wrong place for God. God was there. I see how he was there. He was working even when I didn't realize it. How many times do we miss what God wants to do in our everyday lives because we're waiting for that big thing, that big breakthrough, that breathtaking miracle? What if God isn't absent from your everyday life? What if he's right there, even in the repetitive, even in the routine, the seemingly insignificant? As we continue in this series on Elisha, today we're going to look at 2 Kings chapter 4 and 5 and get a little bit into chapter 6. You're like, we're going to cover 3 chapters in one sermon. We are going to go quickly. But we're going to look at what some scholars call part of the Elisha cycle. It's this list of miracles. And in these miracles that Elisha does, and I have to be careful about saying that because we all know it's God doing the miracles. He's just using Elisha as his messenger, as his instrument. But as these stories unfold, we see God do extraordinary things. But here's the thing that is remarkable. He does these extraordinary things through just common people, common objects, everyday situations. And they just began to build on each other. And we began to get this picture of how God sometimes works in our lives. And so I want you to see that. If you have a Bible, you might look at 2 Kings chapter 4. Like I said, we're going to move quickly. We're not going to dig down deeply. And I would encourage you to read this sometime on your own. But we're going to try to get through these and try to make some points at the end. So buckle up. The first of what I'm calling mundane miracles that Elisha does is done with a widow. This widow is a person in need, and Elisha says, what do you need? How can I help you? Without her husband, she can't pay her debts, and she's worried. She's worried that the people she owes are going to come in and take her sons from her to work for them. She's going to lose her sons if she can't pay her debts. She explains this to Elisha, and he asks her a question, a seemingly simple, benign question. He says to her, what do you have? What do you have in the house? What do you own that God can use? She looks around. She says, all I have is this small jar of oil. He says, here's what you need to do. Hold on to that. Go ask all your neighbors to give you as many empty jars as you can find. And take those home and then begin to fill those jars with oil. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 5. She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, bring me another one. But he replied, there is not a jar left. Then the oil stopped flowing. She fills all these jars with oil from her little single one jar of oil. It's a miracle. Elisha then tells her, go and sell all of that oil, pay off your debts, and then use the rest for you and your sons to live on. An incredible miracle. God provided. He turned this ordinary jar of oil into extraordinary provision for this family. Second miracle. I told you we're going fast. It's about a couple who shows hospitality to Elisha. He wants to show them gratitude, so he says, what do you need? What can I do for you? They want to have a child. And so God enables this woman to get pregnant. She has a baby boy, but something happens a little bit later. Either he gets sick or there's an accident, and he tragically loses his life. Elisha gets the news. He comes back. And God uses Elisha, and specifically his physical touch with the little boy, to bring life where there was death. The warmth and life of Elisha literally is transferred to this little boy. And the biblical text says that the boy sneezes 7 times and he gets up and walks. Now that's a big miracle, right? Bringing someone back to life. But how did God do it? By simply using who was available. Using what was available? The human touch physical contact from Elisha. And through that physical contact, he brought life where there was death. Next miracle. There's a famine in the land. That means there's a food shortage. Elisha tells his servant, make a big pot of stew and feed the company of prophets. The company of prophets, it could also be translated as the son of prophets. It was this group of apprentices that learned what it meant to be a prophet. And so they would study with and do life with prophets. Elisha says, we need to feed them, tells the servant, make a big pot of stew. Well, one of the apprentices wants to help out, wants to contribute. So he goes out into the field and he finds a vine that is unknown. He doesn't even know what it is, but it has gourds on it. And hey, those will be good in the stew. So he takes some of the gourds, he goes back, chops them up, throws them in the pot. And now it's time to feed everyone. And here's what happens, verse 40 of chapter 4. The stew was poured out for the men. But as they began to eat it, they cried out, man of God, this is what Elisha is known as, man of God, there is death in the pot. And they could not eat it. Now, quick note here, pro tip, if someone you love and loves you makes you a bowl of soup and puts it in front of you, that should not be your response. There is death in this pot. Don't say that, okay? That's not a good thing to say. And it wasn't that it tasted so bad. Evidently, it was harmful. It was poisonous. So Elisha steps in, and what does he do? He takes a handful of flour, throws it in the pot, says, stir it up, and then give it to them. And it's fine. It doesn't hurt them. It's good. God uses a common ingredient, flour. Something that is probably in your pantry and mine, something we all know about, something that is very common. He uses a common ingredient, something readily available, to transform something deadly into something that is life-giving. That's what God does. Next miracle. It's also a food miracle. Someone comes to Elisha, has 20 loaves of bread. Elisha says, feed the people. Well, the guy does the math. There's 100 people. I only have 20 small loaves of bread. That's not going to work. Elisha says, go ahead, give it to them. Verse 43, give it to the people to eat, for this is what the Lord says. They will eat and have some left over. Then he set it before them, and they ate and had some left over, according to the word of the Lord. And that's an important phrase there. Basically, what he's saying is just as God said it would be, that's what happened. As you hear that story, if you're familiar at all with the New Testament, does it ring a bell? Does it sound familiar? In many ways, it is a foretaste, pun intended, of what Jesus did later, right? When he fed the multitudes. Remember, you're going to have some left over, 12 basketfuls to gather up afterwards. I'm always amazed at exactly how that unfolded. I mean, can you imagine what that looked like? Whether it was Elisha's miracle or Jesus' miracle of feeding the multitudes with just a small portion of food, as they took some, did just more appear in front of them, or was it just sort of a kind of a subtle thing as they passed it out, it just never ran out? I don't know. But everyone was fed, and there was some left over. God miraculously expanding something small, something normal, something limited, and doing something extravagant with it, something extraordinary. In chapter 5, we read about a man named Naaman. He is the general of a neighboring nation's army. He is not a believer in God. In some way or the other, he gets leprosy. He gets a deadly skin disease. At least that's what it appears from the text. He has some kind of skin disease, some kind of problem, and he wants help. Now, if it is leprosy, that is deadly. That is not good at all. And so he gets word that Elisha, this man of God, this prophet of Yahweh, might be able to help him. And so he goes to Elisha based on a recommendation. Now, remember, he's not a believer in God. Elisha welcomes him, and I think looks at this as an opportunity to bear witness to the power of the one true God to this man who, by the way, has influence and power. He is an army general. And so Naaman receives him, and he gives him a very simple instruction. He says, go wash yourself in the Jordan River 7 times, and you will come out cleansed. You will come out healed of your skin disease. Notice Naaman's response, chapter 5, verse 11. But Naaman went away angry, and he said, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and he went off in a rage. Keep in mind, he's the one in need. He goes to Elisha. He doesn't like what he hears, and he goes off angry. Now, before you get too judgy on Naaman, reflect for a moment. Isn't he giving voice to our frustrations so often? We have our needs, whether they're physical needs like his, emotional, relational, financial, some kind of need, health needs. And what do? If we're people of faith, we take them to God. God, help me. God, deliver me. God, change my circumstances. Bring healing to my life. Bring healing to this relationship. And we cry out to God. And with that cry, we have an expectation, don't we? At least a strong desire. Here's what I want. And here's how I think God should answer my prayer. And so in many respects, Naaman gives voice to our frustration when we take our needs to God and he doesn't do, and he doesn't say, and he doesn't respond the way we think he should. Naaman evidently wanted something immediate from God. Something grand, something glorious, something dramatic. He wanted a spectacle. Washing in the dirty Jordan River in a foreign land and have to do it 7 times? That's so common, that's so ordinary, that's so boring, that's so meh. It's like God asking me to set up chairs or sweep the floor or take out the trash. Like us, way too often, Naaman had his own idea about what God should do to bring purpose and meaning in his life, to bring healing to his life, to answer his prayer. But thankfully, for Naaman's sake at least, his servants kind of had a better perspective. And notice what they say, verse 13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? Naaman kind of pauses for a minute and thinks, well, I guess it's worth a shot. So he goes and he plunges himself into the Jordan River. He does it 7 times, and what do you know? He comes out and he's healed. He's cleansed of his skin disease. His response is a testimony to the power of God. Because remember, he's an outsider. He's not a worshiper of Yahweh God. But what does he say? He says, now I know that the only God in all the world is the God of Israel, is Yahweh God, the one and only God. All right, one more mundane miracle, which, by the way, is kind of an oxymoron, right? Mundane miracle. Chapter 6 opens with another of these miracles. The company of prophets needs a bigger place to meet, and so they go down to the Jordan River. They have this plan to build a bigger place, and so they start cutting down trees and getting materials and building this thing. Well, while one of the guys is hacking away on this tree, the axe head flies off the handle, launches into the river, and of course sinks to the bottom. And he panics because this doesn't belong to him. He's borrowed this axe. Elisha steps in and saves the day. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 6. The man of God, again that's Elisha, asked, where did it fall? When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there. And he made the iron float. Lift it out, he said. Then the man reached out his hand and took it. Simple miracle. Like so many of these miracles, common things. A cup of oil, a loving touch, 7 sneezes, a handful of flour, a few loaves of bread, a dirty river, simple instructions, a borrowed axe, a common stick. Ordinary people, ordinary objects, ordinary circumstances. And so what made them different? It's what God did with them because he is an extraordinary God. God often does his good work, his extravagant work, his extraordinary work through common people, simple things, and ordinary moments in life. We just often miss it. You see, Elisha took what he had, took what others had, took what was available, and offered them up to God and said, God, use these. Do what you do. And God did. Sometimes we think if I just had more, if I just had more money, if I just had more time, if I just had more opportunities, if I just had more talent, if I just had more followers, if I just had more influence, then I could do something big. Then I could do something great. Then I could do something that mattered. And maybe God is looking at you saying, just bring me what you have. Just give what you have. Just offer who you are, where you are, and what you have been blessed with. Let's just start there. Because that's where true purpose and faithfulness begins. Where you are. Where you are right now. If you have the mindset of one day I'm going to do something big for God. One day I'm going to be very faithful. One day I'm going to make an impact. There's a good chance you're never going to reach that day because you're missing what God wants to do with you right now. Be faithful where you are. Offer to God what you have. You see, ordinary things can become extraordinary when we surrender them to God. Now, you already know, if you had the words ordinary or extraordinary on your bingo card today, you are getting all kinds of points. But the reason I keep repeating those words is because I want this to stick. I want you to leave here with those two words kind of bouncing around your head. My life is ordinary, but God can do the extraordinary. Because you're going to go back to your life. You're going to go back to doing those things that you pretty much did last week, that you're probably going to pretty much do next week. And you're going to get caught in the rut, in the routine, and you're going to wonder, where's God? What's God doing? Is this all there is? So I want you to remember those words. When we offer to God what we think is ordinary, he can do the extraordinary in your life. He has a way of attaching a little extra on the front of ordinary. About 10 years ago, there was a young husband and father named Nathaniel, and he had dreamed of doing something big for God. In his mind, he thought that means I need to be a minister, I need to be a missionary, I need to do something visible, something big, have an impact, make a difference. But he also was reasonable, and he knew I probably need some training, I need to go to school for that, and school's expensive. He had a young family, they needed him, they needed the stability, they needed a paycheck. And when he was being completely honest, he thought, I don't even know if I'm cut out for this. I don't know if that's really what I should do. And one day at church, he met a guy that owned a plumbing company, and he was hiring. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't really ministry per se. It wasn't what he pictured when he thought about his life and he imagined serving God and being a spiritual influence in the world. But he prayed this. He prayed, Lord, make me the kind of person who could someday do what you've called me to do. Make me the kind of person who will prepare me to do what you've called me to do. And so he took the job. Well, 10 years later, he's still a plumber. And he says it's the best thing that ever happened to his spiritual development. You wouldn't expect spiritual formation to take place under a sink or in a hot water heater closet. But that's where Nathaniel discovered what many of us often miss out on. And that is that discipleship is often learned and lived out in the everyday moments among everyday people. So wrench in hand, he learned to pray while he was working. And he began to open up conversation with the people he was not only working with, but working for on the various jobs. And he found ways to talk about his faith. He found ways to ask people about their lives, their faith. And he learned something. Every day that he went to work, every day that he prayed, every day that he interacted with these people, he learned something God was showing him. And that was that our jobs, our vocations, our careers, and our faith, those aren't two separate paths. Those aren't two separate worlds. They're interconnected. That's the way God wants it. That's the way it should be. And he finally learned that. And somewhere between tightening pipes and fixing leaks and interacting with other people and reading his Bible at night and studying theology when he had an opportunity, God was shaping him and his perspective, especially on his own purpose. And here's what Nathanael said. He said, "This isn't the life I expected, but it's the life for which I prayed." Do you remember his prayer? Help me be the kind of person that is being prepared for what you've called me to do. In his mind, he thought he knew what that was. Something big, something visible. And now he realized, not what I expected, but it's exactly what I prayed for. Ordinary moments, common things, regular jobs. When we offer them to God and we respond in faithfulness, watch what God will do. Open your eyes and see what you couldn't see when you're waiting for the big, breathtaking miracle. That's finally what Naaman does. Remember the army general who had leprosy? That's what he finally does. He finally set aside his expectations for something dramatic, and he simply submitted to God. He simply obeyed. He simply did what the man of God told him to do. Go wash in the Jordan. It didn't make sense. It wouldn't be what he would recommend. It wasn't what he wanted to do necessarily. It wasn't flashy, that's for sure. But when he obeyed, God did something remarkable. See, God works through simple acts of obedience. Don't miss that. God is in the routine of daily faithfulness and the mundane of regular obedience, just as he is in those big moments. So remain faithful in those seemingly insignificant moments when your faith is tested, when your integrity is on the line, when temptation is lurking. Be faithful in those moments. Continue to walk in obedience to God. Because sometimes the ordinary thing that God wants to use is you. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, "Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world, the despised things, the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." Now, Paul, don't misunderstand, Paul is not saying that you are weak or despised or foolish the way we typically understand those words. It's his way of saying God prefers to work through regular people and common things. You know why? So that we can more clearly see it is his power at work, not our ability, not our knowledge, not our giftedness. It is God. God is the one at work. Paul would later write that God's power is made perfect in his weakness, in Paul's own weakness. So maybe we need to stop asking, God, when are you going to do something big? When are you going to do something great? When are you going to do something special in my life? And start asking, God, what are you doing? What am I missing? What do you want to do? So here's the practical question I'd like for you to carry with you this week. It's the same question that Elisha asked the widow. Pretty simple question. What do you have? Remember what he asked her? What do you have in the house? Basically, he was saying, what do you have that God can use? That's the question. What ordinary thing is God asking for from you? As you go out into this week and you do all the routine things that you do, and maybe a few different things here and there, let that question permeate your thoughts. What ordinary thing is God asking for? And maybe it is something tangible. For the woman, it was this small jar of oil. Maybe for you, it's your home. Maybe it's your vehicle. Maybe it's a simple meal, a batch of cookies. I don't know. Maybe it's something you can give away to bless someone else. It's something tangible, something physical. Or maybe it's something completely different. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's something on your schedule this week. Maybe if you're like me on Sunday night, I sort of look over my week schedule. Maybe you look at your schedule and you see they have a meeting there. I have a business trip there. I have a conversation scheduled here. I have this appointment there. Maybe it's something you're anticipating this week. And you're going to offer that to God and say, God, I don't know how. I don't know what it would look like. But I'm offering that to you. I'm giving that over to you, surrendering it to you for you to do something in that meeting, in that appointment, in that conversation. Maybe it's a phone conversation, a text message. Maybe it's an opportunity that you're going to have this week to resist temptation. Not by your own willpower, but you're going to surrender that moment to God. In that moment, temptation is right there, and you're going to release it to God. It's an ordinary thing. It happens all the time. But this time, you're going to respond differently. You're going to respond in faithfulness and obedience, and you're going to hand that over to God and say, God, please show up in this moment. Do what you do. Do something special. What is it for you? I just encourage you to give over to God whatever is in your life, starting with you, yourself. Give over to God yourself, your life, whatever you own, whatever opportunities are in front of you. And then open your eyes and watch God do the extraordinary through the ordinary. We want to walk with you on this journey of faith. It's not easy to walk along. And so our shepherds want to encourage you in just a moment. 2 of them and their wives will be in the parlor, a room right behind the stage area. You can meet them there in just a minute when we stand up. And they'll pray for you. They'll listen to you. They'll encourage you. You can come down to the front. We'll do it as a church family if you prefer that. Maybe today you're ready to surrender your life to Christ, to be baptized into Christ, to be raised out of the waters of baptism, like Naaman, cleansed, not of a skin disease, of something so much more deadly, sin. And you're ready to give that over to Jesus. He's ready to take it from you. Don't wait any longer. If there's something we can do, we invite you to come as we stand and sing. Let's stand.
Let the weak say